Perhaps this has already happened to you. You're at a gathering, surrounded by people, and suddenly something shifts. Not in the room, but in you. A quiet voice rises from somewhere deep inside, whispering, "I don't want to be here. I don't want to be seen right now." And instead of feeling social or engaged, you feel exposed, as if every pair of eyes is touching something inside you that you didn't give them permission to reach. You don't hate people. You haven't become bitter or cold, but lately something has changed. The desire to be noticed, to be recognized, to be visible in the world. It's fading, and in its place there's something else, a pull inward, a quiet hunger to disappear, not from life, but from the gaze of others. If this resonates with you, stay right here, because what you're experiencing is not depression, it's not social anxiety, and it's certainly not a sign that something is broken inside you. According to Jung, one of the most profound psychologists who ever lived, this urge to withdraw from the eyes of the world may actually be one of the most important turning points in your entire psychological life. Today we're going to explore why some people reach a point where they no longer want to be seen, why that invisible pull toward disappearing is not weakness, but transformation, and why Jung believed that the moment you stop performing for the world is the exact moment your real life begins. So, stay until the end, because if you've been carrying guilt or confusion about this need to fade from view, today you might finally understand what your soul has been trying to tell you. And before we begin, take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. Have you ever felt that sudden desire to vanish from a room, not out of fear, but out of something deeper you couldn't quite name? Tell me about it. I want to hear your experience. Think about your life 5 years ago, maybe even 2 years ago. Were you different? Did you crave attention more? Did you post more, talk more, show up more, show up more, show up more? Did you feel a certain thrill when people noticed you, praised you, acknowledged your presence? And now, something has shifted. You find yourself pulling back. Not dramatically, not with an announcement, but quietly. You stop sharing as much. You decline invitations that once excited you. You sit in rooms and feel a strange distance between yourself and everyone else, not because you dislike them, but because something inside you has moved to a different frequency. This is not random. This is not a phase. Carl Jung would say, this is the psyche reorganizing itself. And it often begins with a single disorienting realization. The version of you that the world sees is not the version of you that actually exists. Jung called this outer version the persona. And the persona is not evil. It is not false in the way a lie is false. It is a necessary adaptation. From the moment you were a child, you learned to shape yourself according to what was expected. You smiled when your parents needed you to smile. You performed well when teachers needed you to perform. You became charming, or funny, or competent, or easygoing, because that was the version of you that received love, acceptance, and safety. And over time, this version became so familiar that you forgot it was a construction. You mistook the mask for the face. But here is what happens. At a certain point in your psychological development, the mask begins to crack. Not because something went wrong, but because something is going right. Your deeper self, the one Jung called the self with a capital S, begins to stir. It starts sending signals. Discomfort in social situations that used to feel natural. A heaviness after conversations that once felt light. A growing inability to perform enthusiasm you don't feel. And most of all, a desire to stop being seen. Because what people see when they look at you is the persona. And the persona is no longer enough. Have you ever had this experience? You're talking to someone, maybe even someone close to you, and in the middle of the conversation, you suddenly feel completely alone. Not because they're ignoring you, but because they're responding to a version of you that doesn't feel real anymore. They laugh at the joke you made, but the joke came from the mask. They compliment something you did, but the thing you did was a performance. And you think if they could see what's actually happening inside me right now, they wouldn't recognize me at all. That moment, that strange, lonely feeling in the middle of connection, is what Jung would call the beginning of consciousness. It is the moment when the ego, your sense of who you are, starts to separate from the persona, the role you've been playing. And this separation is deeply unsettling because it raises a terrifying question. If the person everyone sees is not really me, then who am I? And this is precisely why you want to disappear. Not because you are weak, but because you are standing at the edge of the most important discovery of your life. And to make that discovery, you need space. You need silence. You need to stop performing long enough to hear what lies beneath the performance. Let's go deeper, because the desire to not be seen doesn't just come from the persona cracking. It also comes from something Jung considered one of the most powerful and misunderstood forces in the human psyche: the shadow. Your shadow is everything you have pushed away, denied, hidden, or suppressed since childhood. It is the anger you were told was unacceptable, the sadness you learned to swallow, the ambition you were shamed for, the sensitivity you were mocked for, the desires you buried because they didn't fit the image you were building. All of this lives in the shadow. And the shadow does not disappear just because you refuse to look at it. It grows, it waits, and at some point it begins to demand your attention. Now here is the connection that most people miss. When you are visible, when you are out in the world being seen and perceived and evaluated, you are constantly managing your image. You are making sure the shadow stays hidden. Every social interaction becomes, on some level, an act of concealment. You are not just showing people who you are actively hiding who you also are. And that is exhausting. It is a war fought on two fronts, presenting the acceptable self while suppressing the unacceptable self. And at some point, your psyche simply says, enough. I cannot do both anymore. This is why the desire to withdraw often comes with a strange feeling of relief. When you are alone, when no one is watching, you don't have to manage the shadow anymore. You don't have to guard against it slipping out. You can sit with your darker thoughts without worrying that someone will see them on your face. You can feel your real emotions without filtering them for public consumption. You can, for the first time in perhaps a very long time, simply exist without performing existence. Jung said that the shadow is not your enemy, it is your unlived life. And until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. So when you feel that pull to disappear, consider this. Maybe your psyche is not breaking down. Maybe it is creating the conditions necessary for you to finally meet the parts of yourself you have been running from. And you cannot meet them in a crowd. You cannot meet them while smiling at a dinner party. You can only meet them while smiling at a dinner party. You can only meet them in the sacred, terrifying silence of being alone with yourself. Think about what happens when someone really sees you. Not the surface you, not the curated version, but the real, unfiltered, unmanaged you. There is a vulnerability in that which is almost unbearable. Your chest tightens, your breath gets shallow. Something in you wants to look away, change the subject, make a joke, anything to break the intensity of being truly perceived. Jung understood this deeply. He knew that being seen is not just a social act, it is a psychological event. When another person truly sees you, their gaze reaches past the persona and touches something raw. And if you are not ready for that, if you have not yet done the inner work of integrating your shadow and understanding your true self, then being seen feels like being invaded. It feels like a threat. This is why many people who are on the edge of deep psychological transformation become intensely private. They pull away not because they fear people, but because they fear being seen before they are ready. There is a part of them that knows they are changing, that something new is forming inside, and that this new thing is too fragile, too unformed, too tender to be exposed to the world's gaze. Think of it this way. A caterpillar does not transform into a butterfly in the open air. It builds a cocoon. It hides. It dissolves its entire previous form in darkness and solitude before it can emerge as something new. If you tore open the cocoon too early, you would not find a butterfly. You would find something unrecognizable, something between forms, something that needs the protection of invisibility to complete its becoming. That is what is happening inside you. You are between forms. The old you, the one who smiled and performed and showed up and sought approval, that version is dissolving. And the new you, the one who is more honest, more grounded, more connected to something real, that version has not fully formed yet. And your psyche knows this. It knows that exposure right now would be dangerous. Not physically dangerous, but psychologically dangerous. The new self needs protection. And the protection it needs is your withdrawal from the gaze of others. So when people ask you what's wrong, when they say you've changed, when they tell you that you used to be more fun or more social or more present, understand what is really happening. They are looking for the old you, the persona, the mask, and the mask is lying on the floor. And you are not ready to show them what is underneath. Not yet. And that is not cowardice. That is wisdom. Now let's talk about something that Jung explored extensively, but that most people understand only on the surface. Energy. Psychic energy. Because the desire to not be seen is not just an emotional preference, it is an energetic reality. Jung believed that the psyche operates on a principle of energy conservation, much like the physical body. You have a finite amount of psychic energy at any given time, and that energy flows in two directions, outward, toward the world, toward people, toward action and engagement, or inward, toward reflection, toward the unconscious, toward the deep inner work of self-understanding. When your energy is flowing outward, you feel social, engaged, visible. You want to be seen because being seen is how you interact with the world. But when your energy shifts inward, and this happens naturally at certain stages of life and psychological development, the external world begins to feel draining, not because it has changed, but because your energy is no longer moving in that direction. It is moving downward, inward, toward something the conscious mind cannot yet name. This inward turn of energy is what Jung called introversion in its deepest sense, not the pop psychology version of introversion, not just preferring quiet evenings at home, but a fundamental redirection of the life force toward the interior world. And when this happens, every external demand on your energy, every social interaction, every moment of being perceived and evaluated and responded to feels like a withdrawal from a bank account that is already running low. This is why you feel so tired after social events you used to enjoy. This is why small talk feels almost physically painful. This is why you look at your phone and see messages and invitations and feel a heaviness in your chest instead of excitement. Your energy is going somewhere else. It is going where it needs to go. And the more you fight this, the more exhausted you become. Jung was very clear about this. When the psyche directs energy inward, the worst thing you can do is force yourself to keep directing it outward. That creates a split, a war inside you between where the energy wants to go and where you are forcing it to go. And that split manifests as anxiety, irritability, fatigue, a strange sense of being hollow, even when you are surrounded by people. You are present in body but absent in spirit, because your spirit has gone underground to do work that the conscious mind doesn't yet understand. So here is the permission you may need to hear. If your energy has turned inward, follow it. If the world feels too bright, too loud, too much, dim the lights. If being seen feels like a weight, allow yourself to be invisible for a while. Your psyche is not malfunctioning. It is functioning exactly as it should. It is pulling you towards something. And the only way to find out what that something is to stop resisting the pull. There is a moment in many people's lives that Jung would have recognized immediately. It is the moment when you realize that everything you have built, your career, your social circle, your reputation, your carefully constructed life, was built to be seen. Not necessarily out of vanity, but out of a deep unconscious belief that being seen equals being safe. Being seen equals being loved. Being seen equals being real. Think about how early this begins. As children, we learn that visibility equals survival. The child who is seen by the parent is the child who is fed, protected, held. The child who is invisible is the child who is neglected. So we learn at the deepest level of our being that to exist is to be perceived. And we carry this equation into adulthood without ever questioning it. We build lives designed for visibility. We choose careers that others can admire. We cultivate personalities that others find appealing. We post images and stories and updates that invite the world to look at us, to confirm that we exist, to validate our reality through their attention. And for a long time, this works. The attention feels good. The recognition feels good. The recognition feels like nourishment. The visibility feels like safety. But then something shifts. And this is the shift that Jung would say is the most important one. You begin to realize that the safety you feel from being seen is not real safety. It is borrowed safety. It is borrowed safety. It depends entirely on others continuing to look at you. And the moment they look away, the moment the attention fades, the moment the lights stop coming, or the praise dries up, or the invitations thin out, you are left standing in a terrifying void, because you never built a foundation inside yourself. You only built a stage. And this realization, this awful, liberating, ground-shaking realization, is often what triggers the desire to disappear. You are not just withdrawing from people. You are withdrawing from a way of existing that was never sustainable. You are pulling back from a life built on external validation because you have finally understood, maybe not in words, but in your bones, that a life built on being seen by others is a life that can be destroyed the moment others look away. Jung would call this the collapse of the persona's foundation. And it feels like a crisis. It feels like you are falling apart, but you are not falling apart. You are falling inward. And there is a profound difference. Let's pause here for a moment, because if you are feeling something right now, a tightness, a recognition, a quiet ache, I want you to know that what you are feeling is not a sign of something wrong. It is a sign that you are listening. And listening to yourself, truly listening, is one of the rarest and bravest things a person can do. Now let's talk about what happens in the darkness. Because when you withdraw from being seen, when you let yourself disappear from the world's gaze, you enter a space that most people are terrified of. You enter your own interior. And what you find there, at least at first, is not peace. It is chaos. Jung was honest about this. He never romanticized the inner journey. He knew that when you stop running from yourself and turn around to face what is inside, the first thing you encounter is everything you have been avoiding. The grief you never processed, the anger you never expressed, the dreams you abandoned, the truths you never spoke, the parts of yourself you amputated to fit into the world. They are all there, waiting in the dark, and they do not greet you gently. This is why so many people resist the pull to withdraw. Not because they love being social, but because they are terrified of what they will find if they stop. The noise, the activity, the constant engagement with others, it all serves a purpose. It drowns out the inner voices, and when the noise stops, the voices get loud. But Jung also said something crucial. He said that in the middle of difficulty lies opportunity, and the opportunity that lies in this darkness, in this confrontation with your inner world, is nothing less than the chance to become whole. Because the parts of yourself that you have been hiding, the shadow material, the suppressed emotions, the abandoned dreams, these are not just problems to be solved. They are pieces of you that have been waiting to be reclaimed. Every emotion you suppressed carries energy that belongs to you. Every dream you abandon carries a truth about who you really are. Every part of your personality that you hid to please others is a piece of your wholeness that has been living in exile. And the only way to bring these pieces home is to go into the dark and find them. Not with a flashlight and a plan, but with patience and willingness and the courage to sit with discomfort until it reveals what it has been holding. This is why solitude is not just a preference for people going through this process. It is a necessity. You cannot do this work in public. You cannot integrate your shadow while managing your persona. You cannot listen to your deepest self while also listening to the expectations of others. The two activities are fundamentally incompatible. One requires openness, the other requires armor. And you have been wearing armor for so long that you have forgotten what your skin feels like. So when you close the door, when you turn off the phone, when you cancel the plans and sit alone in a quiet room, you are not wasting time. You are doing the most important work a human being can do. You are meeting yourself, perhaps for the first time. Jung spoke often about a process he called active imagination. It is the practice of turning inward deliberately, of engaging with the images and feelings and figures that arise from the unconscious, not to analyze them, but to relate to them, to sit with a feeling of sadness and ask it what it wants, to notice an image that keeps appearing in your mind and let it speak, to treat the inner world not as a problem to be fixed, but as a landscape to be explored. And this practice requires something very specific. It requires that no one is watching, because the moment you feel observed, the persona activates, the social self kicks in. You begin to manage and curate and filter, and the fragile, tentative voice of the unconscious, which speaks in whispers and images and half-formed feelings, gets drowned out by the loud, competent voice of the self you show the world. This is another reason why you don't want to be seen right now. Your unconscious is trying to communicate with you. It has things to show you, things to tell you, things to offer you, but it will only speak when the room is empty. It will only appear when the audience has left. It is like a wild animal that comes to drink at the river only when the shore is still. Any movement, any presence, any gaze, and it retreats back into the forest. So, your withdrawal is not antisocial. It is an act of profound hospitality. You are making space inside yourself for the most important guest you will ever receive, your own truth. Now I want to talk about something that often accompanies this desire to disappear: guilt. Because you feel it, don't you? You feel guilty for pulling away. You feel guilty for not wanting to see people, You feel guilty for preferring silence over conversation, solitude over company, invisibility over presence. You feel like you are failing at something, like you are letting people down, like you are becoming someone cold and distant and unrecognizable. And the guilt is heavy. It sits on your chest like a stone, because everything you have been taught tells you that connection is good and withdrawal is bad, that healthy people want to be around others, that isolation is a symptom of illness, that if you don't want to be seen, something must be wrong with you. But let me ask you this, who taught you that? Who decided that constant visibility is the measure of a healthy life? Who made the rule that you must always be available, always be social, always be performing your existence for an audience? Because Jung would challenge that rule deeply. He would say that the pressure to always be visible is itself a form of psychological violence. It is the world demanding that you sacrifice your inner life for the comfort of the outer one. And at a certain point, the soul simply refuses. The guilt you feel is not a sign that you are doing something wrong. It is the last gasp of the persona trying to pull you back into the old pattern. The persona thrives on approval. It needs to be seen to survive. And when you begin to withdraw, the persona panics. It sends guilt like an alarm signal, trying to get you to return to the stage, to put the mask back on, to resume the performance. Because if you stop performing, the persona loses its reason to exist, and no part of the psyche gives up its power without a fight. So, the guilt is not your truth. It is your mask's fear of being retired, and you can acknowledge it, you can feel it, you can even be compassionate toward it, but you do not have to obey it. You can feel guilty and still choose solitude. You can feel the pull of obligation and still honor your need to withdraw. You can disappoint others and still be a good person. These things are not contradictions. They're the growing pains of someone who is finally choosing themselves. Jung once used a term that I think captures this entire experience beautifully. He called it the night sea journey. It comes from ancient mythology, the story of the hero who is swallowed by a great sea creature and must travel through the dark belly of the beast before emerging on the other side, transformed. The night sea journey is Jung's metaphor for the psychological experience of going into the darkness willingly, of descending into the unconscious, of losing everything familiar, your identity, your certainty, your place in the world, and traveling through a period of confusion and dissolution before being reborn as something more authentic, more whole, more real. And here is what I want you to understand. The desire to not be seen is the beginning of your night sea journey. You are being swallowed, not by depression, not by failure, not by social inadequacy. You are being swallowed by your own transformation. And it feels dark and disorienting and lonely, because that is exactly what it is supposed to feel like. You are not lost. You are in transit. The night sea journey cannot happen in daylight. It cannot happen on stage. It cannot happen while people are watching and evaluating and commenting. It happens in the deep, in the dark, in the hidden places where the old self dissolves and the new self takes shape. And your instinct to withdraw, to hide, to become invisible, is your psyche's way of saying, we are entering the deep water now, and I need you to trust me. Think about the people in your life, the ones who knew the old you, the you who was social, visible, present, performing. They are confused right now, aren't they? They don't understand why you've changed. They take it personally. They think you're angry or depressed, or that they've done something wrong. And you don't know how to explain it to them because you can barely explain it to yourself. This is one of the loneliest aspects of this process. The people who love you are looking for someone who is disappearing. and the person who is emerging in their place is not yet fully formed, not yet ready to be known. So you exist in a gap, too changed to go back, not changed enough to reveal what you are becoming. And in that gap, relationships strain, misunderstandings multiply, and you carry the additional weight of knowing that your transformation is hurting people you care about, even though you are not doing it to hurt them. Jung would say that this is the cost of individuation, the cost of becoming your true self, because your true self does not fit neatly into the roles that others have assigned you. Your true self does not perform on command. Your true self has needs and depths and dimensions that the people around you may never have seen because you never showed them. You couldn't. You were too busy maintaining the persona. And now that the persona is cracking, the people around you are seeing the cracks and mistaking them for damage. They don't realize that what looks like falling apart is actually something being rebuilt from the inside. They can't see the architecture because the scaffolding is still up. And you can't show them yet because the building isn't finished. So what do? You do the hardest thing. You hold the tension. You carry the guilt and the confusion and the misunderstanding. And you keep going inward anyway. Not because you are selfish, but because you understand, maybe for the first time, that you cannot give anyone your authentic presence until you have found it within yourself. You cannot truly be with others until you have truly been with yourself. And right now, being with yourself requires being away from everyone else. There is something else happening here that deserves attention. When you stop wanting to be seen, you also stop wanting to see yourself through other people's eyes. And this is a more radical shift than it might sound. For most of your life, you have understood yourself through reflection, not inner reflection, but social reflection. You knew who you were based on how others responded to you. If they laughed, you were funny. If they admired you, you were successful. If they loved you, you were lovable. Your identity was a mirror held up by the world, and you adjusted yourself constantly based on what you saw reflected back. But now, the mirror is down. You have stepped away from the gaze, and without that external reflection, you are forced to confront a question that is both simple and devastating. Who am I when no one is looking? Jung would say that this question is the gateway to the self, not the ego, not the persona, not the social identity, but the self, the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, known and unknown. And the self cannot be discovered through other people's eyes. It can only be discovered through direct encounter, through sitting alone with yourself and being willing to see whatever is there without editing, without managing, without performing. And this is terrifying, because what if what you find is not impressive? What if the person beneath the persona is not as charming, not as capable, not as lovable as the mask suggested? What if the real you is quieter, stranger, darker, more complex than the version you have been selling to the world? Jung's answer to this fear is simple and profound. The real you is all of those things and more. And the wholeness that comes from accepting all of it, the light and the dark, the strength and the vulnerability, the beauty and the ugliness, that wholeness is worth more than any persona ever built, because the persona can be destroyed by a single rejection, but the self, the integrated self, cannot be destroyed by anything. It does not depend on approval. It does not need an audience. It simply is. And that is what you are moving toward. Not a better mask, not a more convincing performance, but a way of being that does not require anyone to watch. A way of existing that is complete in itself. A way of living that is rooted not in how others see you, but in how deeply you know yourself. Let me share something with you now. 7 insights from Jungian psychology about people who have reached this point, this threshold where they no longer want to be seen. These are not casual observations. They are truths drawn from the deepest understanding of the human psyche. First, you are shedding an identity that was never fully yours. The life you built, the personality you developed, the image you maintained, much of it was constructed in response to external demands. Parents, culture, society, relationships, all of them shaped you into something that could survive in the world. But survival and authenticity are not the same thing. And now your psyche is ready to stop surviving and start living. The desire to be invisible is the first step. You are making space to discover who you are without the costume. Second, your sensitivity to being perceived has increased because your awareness has deepened. You are no longer unconscious of the performance. You can feel the mask on your face. You can feel the gap between what you show and what you feel. And that awareness makes every social interaction more exhausting because you can no longer do it automatically. You are awake now, and being awake in a world that rewards sleeping is deeply uncomfortable. Third, you are protecting something new that is forming inside you. Jung compared the process of psychological transformation to pregnancy. Something is growing, something is developing, something is taking shape in the darkness of the unconscious. And just as a pregnant woman instinctively protects her body, your psyche is instinctively protecting this new development. The withdrawal, the desire for invisibility, the need for solitude, these are not symptoms of illness. They are symptoms of creation. Something is being born in you, and it needs your protection to survive. Fourth, the relationships that feel most draining right now are the ones built on your old persona. The people who exhaust you most are often the people who are most attached to the version of you that is dying. They want the old you back. They want the performer, the pleaser, the reliable mask. And being around them requires you to resurrect a version of yourself that your psyche is actively trying to release. No wonder it feels like drowning. You are being asked to breathe life into something your soul has already buried. Fifth, the loneliness you feel is not the loneliness of absence. It is the loneliness of transition. You are between worlds. The old world of performance and visibility no longer fits. The new world of authenticity and depth has not yet fully materialized. And in this in-between space, you feel disconnected from almost everyone, including yourself. But this loneliness is not permanent. It is the narrow passage between who you were and who you are becoming, and the only way through it is forward. Sixth, your energy is being redirected, not depleted. You may feel tired, unmotivated, foggy, but you are not running out of energy. Your energy is simply going somewhere else. It is flowing into the unconscious, fueling the transformation that is happening beneath the surface. Think of a tree in winter. Above ground it looks dead. No leaves, no fruit, no visible growth. But underground, the roots are working. They are digging deeper, reaching further, building the foundation for a spring that hasn't arrived yet. You are in winter, and your roots are growing. Seventh, and this is perhaps the most important insight of all, you are not becoming less. You are becoming more. The world will tell you that withdrawal means shrinking, that invisibility means shrinking, that solitude means losing. But Jung knew the opposite is true. The person who goes inward, who faces their shadow, who does the hard work of integration, that person emerges not smaller but larger, not weaker but stronger, not less connected but more deeply connected, because their connection is no longer based on performance but on truth. You are not disappearing. You are preparing to arrive fully for the first time. Now let me speak to something that Jung explored with great care, the archetype of the invisible one. In myths and stories throughout human history, there is a recurring figure, the one who hides, the one who withdraws, the one who cloaks themselves and vanishes from the eyes of the world. Sometimes this figure is a wise hermit on a mountaintop. Sometimes it is a mystic in a cave. Sometimes it is a wanderer who walks through the world unseen, observing everything but known by no one. Jung recognized this figure as an archetype, a universal pattern embedded in the collective unconscious of all humanity. The invisible one is not a failure. The invisible one is a seeker. They disappear from the surface because they are diving deep. They withdraw from the scene because they are exploring the unseen. They become invisible to others because they are becoming visible to themselves. And this archetype is alive in you right now. When you feel that pull to vanish, when you fantasize about a life where no one knows your name, when you dream of a small, quiet existence far from the noise and the gaze of the world, that is not depression talking. That is the invisible one waking up inside you. It is an ancient part of your psyche activating, calling you toward a way of being that is deeper and more real than anything the visible world can offer. The invisible one knows something that the persona never learned, that true power does not come from being seen. True power comes from seeing, not being observed, but observing, not being known, but knowing. Not performing for the world, but understanding it. And this shift from being the one who is watched to being the one who watches is one of the most profound psychological transformations a person can undergo. Think about what happens when you stop trying to be seen. Suddenly, you begin to see. You notice things you never noticed before. The way light moves through a room, the real emotion behind someone's casual remark, the patterns in your own thoughts, the quiet movements of your own soul. When you stop projecting outward, your perception turns inward and downward into depths you didn't know existed. And in those depths, you find a richness, a complexity, a beauty that the surface world never offered. This is the gift of invisibility, not emptiness, but fullness, not loss, but discovery, not the end of life, but the beginning of a life, but the beginning of a life lived from the inside out, rather than the outside in. But let me be honest with you, because Jung was always honest, sometimes painfully so. This transformation does not come free. There is a cost, and the cost is the death of the old self. The persona you built, the identity you maintained, the visible, recognized, approved of version of you, it has to die for the new self to emerge. And this death is not metaphorical in the sense that it doesn't hurt. It hurts enormously. It hurts because the old self served you. It protected you. It got you through childhood and adolescence and early adulthood. It earned you love and safety and belonging. And now you are letting it go. And the grief that comes with that is real. You are grieving a version of yourself. And that grief can look like withdrawal, like silence, like the desire to disappear. Because in a very real psychological sense, something inside you is dying. And you need space and privacy to mourn it. You would not expect someone to grieve a loved one at a cocktail party. So why would you expect yourself to grieve your own former identity in public? Give yourself the space. Give yourself the darkness. Give yourself the time to say goodbye to who you were so that you can say hello to who you are becoming. And now, as we near the end of this journey together, let me share something that I believe Jung would want you to hear. Something about what lies on the other side of this darkness. Because there is another side. The night sea journey does end. The cocoon does open. The winter does pass. And what emerges is not the same as what entered. What emerges is something you have never been before. Not the persona, not the mask, not the performance, but you, the real, unedited, unperforming you. And this, you does not need to be seen to feel real. This, you does not need a pause to feel worthy. This, you does not need a world's gaze to feel alive. Because this you has discovered something that the persona never knew, that existence does not require an audience, that your deepest reality is not confirmed by external eyes, but by internal knowing, that you are real not because others perceive you, but because you experience yourself directly, honestly, completely. And from this place, something remarkable happens. You begin to choose visibility rather than needing it. You begin to show up in the world not because you have to, not because your survival depends on it, not because the persona demands it, but because you want to, because you have something real to offer, because your presence comes from fullness rather than emptiness, because when you finally have a solid ground inside yourself, the world's gaze is no longer a threat. It is simply a gaze, and you can meet it or not on your own terms. Jung called this the individuation process completed, not finished in the sense that it ever truly ends, but completed in the sense that you have arrived at a fundamental wholeness. You know who you are. You know what you carry. You know your light and your shadow, your strengths and your wounds, your beauty and your complexity, and you no longer need anyone to confirm any of it. This is freedom. Not the freedom of escape, but the freedom of integration. The freedom of a person who has gone into the dark, faced what was there, and returned with the knowledge that they are enough. Not enough for the world, enough for themselves. And from that sufficiency, everything else flows. So, if you are in the middle of this process right now, if you are in the dark, if you are invisible, if you feel lost and alone and confused about why you no longer want to be seen, I want to leave you with this. You are not broken, you are being remade. You are not lost, you are on the most important journey of your life. You are not disappearing. You are going inward to find something that was always there but was buried under years of performance and pretending. And the world may not understand. Your friends may not understand. Your family may not understand. But your soul understands. And Jung understood. And now perhaps you understand. The desire to not be seen is not the end of something. It is the beginning of everything. It is your soul saying, "Come home. Come inside, come find me. I have been waiting for you in the dark, and I have so much to show you. Trust the pull, honor the silence, protect the darkness, and know that on the other side of this invisibility, there is a version of you that is more real, more whole, and more alive than anything the world has ever seen, because the greatest thing you will ever be seen as is yourself. And you are still becoming that. We've reached the end of this video, but truly, this is only the beginning for you. Together, we've explored why the desire to disappear is not a flaw, but a calling. We walked through the cracking of the persona, the stirring of the shadow, the night sea journey, and the archetype of the invisible one. And we've discovered that on the other side of this withdrawal is not emptiness, but the deepest fullness you've ever known. Now I invite you to carry this understanding gently. Recognize that your need for invisibility is not weakness, but the courage to transform. That your boundaries are not walls of rejection, but doorways to the self. And that right there, in the silence of your unseen life, you hold the possibility to become, day by day, more authentically and completely who you were always meant to be. If this video touched something in you, leave a comment. Share it with someone who might need to hear this today. and subscribe if you haven't already, because we go deep here and there is so much more to explore together. Until next time, honor your silence. It is speaking to you.